It's really one of the most difficult questions that we deal with in the Bible. The idea that God would call for the decimation of a whole population. How do we think about that? We usually want to think about God as a loving God. And some people even say, well, I like the God of the New Testament better because he's a loving God, not like this God we see in the Old Testament. We can't afford that distinction. The God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament are the same God, and we find them all coming together in Jesus. So we have to be careful that we not sort things out that way. First of all, I think we have to come to it with faith and say, you know, I might not be able to understand what God is doing, but I shouldn't think for a moment that I could think it out better, that I could somehow come to a better understanding of it. We don't know all of the crimes of the Canaanites. There are some people groups throughout the history of the world who have done things so horrible that justice can only be done by wiping them out. And if that's God's determination about the Canaanites, then that's what justice calls for. A God who is not just can't really be understood as a God who is love, because where's the love for the victim if justice is not being done? So we have to take God for what he is, for who he is, and trust his wisdom in his judgment. There are a couple other perspectives I think that can also help us. Remember that God also wiped out Sodom and Gomorrah, and we don't seem to get quite the questions about that as we do with the Canaanites. Is it because God just used fire and brimstone instead of using a people like the Israelites? In the end, it shouldn't make any difference what instrument God used. This is how God chose to carry out his judgment on them. Another thing that we ought to notice in the account is that Rahab was spared. Rahab was spared because she recognized the power of Yahweh and decided that she wanted to be on his side. Now, it's interesting because Rahab speaks for all the Canaanites, and she says, we all have heard, we all know, we all fear. But the others chose to stand against Yahweh instead of coming over as Rahab did. Would they have been spared if they had come over? We don't know that for sure. But Rahab was spared, and she did come over. We also have to understand that in the ancient world, they have much more of a corporate identity. That is, all of the people operate as one. They don't think so much in individualistic terms. And so we say, but what about this innocent child or that innocent woman? The fact is they were all branded with the crimes of their people. And those crimes of their people brought judgment on the corporate group of the people. And so in that sense, I think that we have to recognize that this was the way that would be appropriate for the judgment that had to take place. The Canaanites were to be wiped out as a people because of the influence and the crimes that they had committed. Another thing that we should take note of is that in most cases, in the southern campaign and the northern campaign, it was the Canaanites who attacked first. Now, true, they were defending themselves, they believed, against Israelites, but they're the ones that attacked first, and the Israelites met that challenge. One final perspective to consider is that we also know that in the ancient world, when they recorded conquest accounts, there was a certain rhetoric that was fairly typical. Lots of study has been done on this, and the rhetoric of conquest accounts throughout the ancient world, Egyptians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Hittites, all of that rhetoric has been examined. And one of the characteristics of that rhetoric is a hyperbole of universalism. All of the people and all of the lands and all of the cities. And that's hyperbole. That comes with how those accounts were written. We have to ask the question then, when those universal terms are used in the biblical conquest accounts, is it also some level of rhetoric and hyperbole? Again, we don't know for sure. It seems that God really does want them to eliminate all of the Canaanites. but that's still another factor that needs to be considered. None of these solve the problem. They only give us perspectives to consider when we think through it. The only solution to the problem comes in trusting God that He has done what is right. And that's the bottom line.